name is David Oesch. I'm working for Swiss government for Swiss Geoportal at SwissTopo since 6 years, and I'm taking care of a lot of geospatial data. And key issue with geospatial data is that every latitude and longitude can be very personal. Well, that's my background. And for the first question,
yes.
Start with that one. The ethical issues and the need to be communicated is, from what we learned with geospatial data, is actually that if you take over other people's data, you also take over responsibility for this data. You take over for the metadata, you take over for updating and keeping this data set alive, or if a data set is no longer valid, you actually have to delete it or inform your users that it's no longer valid. And the anonymity of data, geospatial data, is a special challenge because, as mentioned before, every latitude, longitude can be tracked actually to a house number or to a person who lives there. And now, second step is know the law. What can you do by law with this data? In certain cantons of Switzerland, even a house number is already a data set which belongs to a person, and you're not allowed to stock it on your database. I think that's a key issue. Latitude, longitude, everything is connected spatial, be careful, and second, know the law.
Okay. My name is Daniela Novak. I'm from Meteoswiss. Since 4 years, I work with mainly aeronautical related data sets, but I am also the project leader of the project Open Government Data at Meteoswiss. So what we plan is that within 2 or 3 years, our data will be free. That means that there is a law change that should happen in the next 2 years, and also then the data will be freely available, and also via OGT principles and by the portal. So what third-party users should know about the data is that Meteoswiss publishes every day terabytes of data. So our interest will be that the data is well documented, and metadata to describe the data is really useful, so that the user knows what can be done with it, but also know that the data is of course also used within Meteoswiss. And so of course you can then track everything and recalculate everything that has been calculated, and we are somehow maybe nervous or excited about what will happen then. Will then people come to us and say, hey, what you calculated then was wrong? So this is, of course, we use standards how, for instance, climatological issues are calculated. And then maybe these should be also published. They are for a certain amount also publicly available. What also is an important issue is that some grid data might be then recalculated, and depending on what research is doing with it, it's important for it to know that something has changed. And also for planning issues, of course, if we plan to change important data sets or manners on how models, for instance, are working, or the layers, or the content, anything, of course, that should be promoted and published very early for planning security. For the geolocation, of course, we have data everywhere from Switzerland, and there that would be, of course, interesting issues that we could address with data, and also there where the data come from, what type of data, what is the quality, and so on, is very important. Also, if you reuse the data is reused, to tell what has been done. At the moment, that would be everything from my side.
My name is Ralf Hauser. I'm one of the driving forces behind PrivaSphere. PrivaSphere is a federally recognized secure transmission platform also for legal issues with courts, lawyers, but authorities in general. We have also private companies on the platform. We do encryption of contents, and we try also to protect your header data. And so we are kind of a little bit the opposite of the open data, since if there's a case of child abuse in a KISS or something like that, that certainly cannot be published without being anonymized. So we don't really publish anything except for the directory information where people can reach out to authorities to be helped. But still, with the Snowden releases of what's happening in the background, there is a lot of interest in who protects himself how. So if anonymized behavioral data can be of use, we are certainly willing to provide it.
Thank you for those perspectives, guys. So in terms of the fundamental questions, do you think you could summarize it in really just a one sentence? Is there possibly some kind of, if you had to explain this to someone who has never had to deal with geodata or meteorological data or privacy implications of data, how would you summarize the issue that some data is ethically unshareable? How would you communicate to someone?
Well, on the street, I think the Facebook Messenger issue or Facebook Messenger discussion we had lately, a couple of weeks, that every location you ever have been with your device has been stored and transmitted to some headquarters. I think that triggers the question: is it allowed for a company to use this data, to share this data, redistribute this data to advertising companies, etc.? I think then you start thinking about it. There was also a nice study or a media report on Nationalrat in Switzerland, Glättli, I think, who showed which position of his mobile device was tracked over a couple of weeks, I think. Yeah? And showing privacy on a map, on a public map, clearly shows you how public you are actually as a person.
Is that a bad thing?
And this is the question. I mean, the question about it is privacy dead or does it exist? Well, my personal opinion is privacy is pretty dead currently. It's pretty dead. You can enforce it with secure emails. You can enforce it with SSL protocols, but at the end, you write your emails on a device where you might have a keylogger installed. So on the other side, the attitude that I have nothing to hide because everything I do is legal is also the wrong attitude in my mind. But that's a personal opinion. I think showing your position on a map leverages the question of what can I do with my privacy? What can be done with my privacy? That's a simple way to enforce a discussion about privacy, ethical issues of data in a geofield. Well, that was more than one sentence.
Daniela?
I also don't think that I will limit it to one sentence, because when you speak about weather, when you go somewhere with your device, you automatically have the weather information about where you are. So that sometimes almost freaks me out, because okay, now somebody knows I'm here and gives me the weather information, and what then really shocks me if this information is wrong. So I wonder where do the data come from. Yeah, it's the information that is given to me without me asking for it. That's the one point, and also in the same way, the information of me given to whatever device, whatever functionality of my mobile device that is going somewhere. So it feels scary. On the one hand, you are so happy if you can just type your email or quickly give an answer when you're sitting in a train and having the weather information for the city where you're going to, if you choose to. But everything is happening automatically, and I think what is very important is to also learn where can I protect myself, how can I limit when I don't want to be too publicly how do you say, perceptible. See it observed or visible. Yes, thank you. So I would say educational issues are coming up here for sure. But still, of course, I still like to have good weather information about the place where I'm going for the next 5 days directly on my mobile device. Soft weather.
Well, I fully agree with both your statements, but I want to continue on what people said. Privacy is under severe attack, and I guess Machiavelli would have screamed of joy from what he sees today. So what can we do? I guess in this country we are double lucky that the last few generations have enjoyed a government that rarely is abusive, or only to very few people, if at all. And similarly, we probably don't have too much of mafia and the like. Regaining some space of privacy is certainly an important thing.
Thanks a lot. I think you guys have shown that there's a deep personal angle to it and a political public life angle to it. It still seems to me like it's really hard to explain to someone. I mean, we don't manage to get it down to a single sentence. Should data ethics be really like part of public discourse? Should more people be aware of data ethics? Do you think is this something that is, or do you think is it already adequately represented in media and education?
I think it should. Take the geospatial world again. There is, for example, a 3D data ethical charter, which has been signed by Switzerland, the Swiss cantons, and by other entities, which enforces the user of 3D data, the provider of 3D data, to provide ethical 3D data. At first glance, this sounds absurd, but if you dig into this document, you actually see that this actually makes sense. It does not make sense to provide every data in 3D, but you have to prepare it to, well, it goes up to meteorological data. What can I show in 3D and what makes sense? Google Street View, for example, is not 3D, but the issue Google Street View had in Switzerland shows that clearly defines that there is a public interest. It's already an ongoing discussion, what can be shown on a map viewer and whatnot.
I believe that it should be somehow institutionalized. That should become a topic at school, in education, where you can really also show examples or make it part of what you learn for your daily life or your future life. So you mentioned law before, I think it was you. We say in German, nicht wissen schützt vor Strafe nicht. And you have to know so many things about data, how to use it, how to publish it, how to deal with it, and also what means of protection you have if you feel that some of your data, your personal life, of your personal data has been abused, or has been published, has been disseminated in a way that you didn't want to. What means do you have? It's really based. It's a jumble, and I really believe it should become daily topics. It should become something institutionally really that you can inform yourself, but also a topic that you can discuss and get information open.
Another attempt to be short, I guess the keyword is informational self-determination, or informationelle Selbstbestimmung. And I don't know if that example you gave earlier was already live with the medical data about compliance with eating medicaments. There, I think you can illustrate it very easily to the people on the street. Luckily, in most parts of the world, people are not forced to participate in medical studies, so the data should be treated such that even if they are not the most compliant ones out within that study, that they don't get retortions by their health insurance or so, because now we know he is not taking his pills.
There is a good example, the Nuremberg Code in 1947, where they actually introduced one first level of data ethics, how to deal with data, was during the Nuremberg trials. And if you summarize that Nuremberg Code up on one bottom line, that is actually think about data sharing before you start the research. Okay, so if you want to reproduce your scientific result, nowadays we expect actually from research that they share the base data, the raw data, so you can reproduce it. This hasn't been the case a lot in the past. When we start with metadata, you need a special contract to get metadata. You need a special contract to get Swiss maps. But those are the easy data sets. If you talk about sociology or medicine genomes, then it becomes tough, because genomes suddenly get intellectual property. And the other point is publish or perish. You always want to be the author. You want to be the key founder of this survey. This is also a big issue. I think one thing is think before you start doing research, and the second thing is you have to deal with humanity, that is publish or perish. It's my name on top of something. This is the challenge, I think, in 2015. And we have so many means to gather data these days. There is this saying that every year you generate more information than complete humanity before. So there's so much data crunching going on. There must be some data. Well,
so history has a tendency to repeat itself, and if we don't learn from the Nuremberg prison data, we are bound to repeat the mistakes ourselves. That's a pretty compelling argument to institutionalize data. So I'd just like to remind everybody that if you would like to chime in at any time, tap on the shoulder of a participant, swap them out. They can then swap themselves back in afterwards, but please feel free to butt into the conversation. I'm just going to keep...
we can ask questions without the skip.
No, you cannot. To ask a question is...
But I would like to add one thing besides institutionalizing, in particular with the research perspective, coming back to the medical research. For the most part, ethics doesn't rule out data from being used. You just have to plan in an extra effort to clean it up or to anonymize it, and that requires some quite intensive statistics skills to really make sure it's not reducing to a set that's so small that you can more or less identify who it was, even if the name is not on it. But if you have planned in those resources, most research data can be used.
Unpublished.
I think that was exactly the next point. Oh, sorry, that was not that. No, thank you. No, thank you. This is great because this is actually, I think, what the majority of people here, at least anyone who's a member of the university or who's thinking of doing research or even doing research at home as citizen science, should be asking themselves is the data that I'm going to be using for making conclusions or analyzing the world, is it useful? I mean, everything is anonymized to some extent. I mean, nobody has the clear picture of anything. That's the whole point of scientific methodology, right? You observe the world and you have to at all times understand that you're observing only a slice of it. So in your experience, what are some effective techniques that you might like to share about anonymizing data, making data more ethically shareable? Any tips?
Tips. Do learn how the internet actually works. I think that's in 2015 key. If you know how the internet works, what is SSL, what is encryption, where is my data stored? It's not simple about cloud computing. It's about if I analyze a log of an Apache web server, even if the survey runs on in an anonymous forum, I know the IP of the user who entered the question or answers on this machine, and this is a challenge. And who has access to your Apache logs? And this is part of your science. So again, learn the limits of the internet.
I'm just going to say one thing.
Yes,
Sorry.
finally.
I just wanted to bring this up because sorry to bring this up because it's interesting in this context. I think it was Google who published search results, and then they discovered who the people were based on the search results. So nothing about the person, just what they searched for and like a bunch of related data. So that's very interesting. Even like when you try to like make things anonymous and when you don't have IP addresses even, sometimes it's not enough. That's it.
Just had a question on camera.
Oh, come on.
There's no camera. There's no camera.
If you want,
There is a camera.
I'll blank it out if you mind.
There's one looking at your head.
Yeah, they're watching.
Come up and ask your question. Don't be shy. I'll block out the video stream if you want.
So,
What about the race?
You have to tap someone on the shoulder.
just about quite often everyone says, yeah, everyone wants to get the publication with your name on it, and it's always in a negative connotation. I mean, it's true, if I do my PhD work that involves a lot of data, then I want people to help me, but in the end, we have to identify who's responsible for this data. So, I mean, I would like to understand why is this always associated with a negative connotation that you have to put your name on it, or you have to publish, and this is why data should be publicly available. But we also have to affiliate the work with a person.
Well, I think this is something that Oleg said this morning before break, that the data collecting is something extremely expensive. It's a huge workload, and when you collect data, it is somehow your baby. So to whom would you give your baby to take care of? So you want to be sure that the data is well treated, that something nice is done with it, and that the person is also thankful to you to give the data to use it. So I think this is an issue, and this has always this connotation of, yeah, you can have it, but I will be co-author on your paper. So you end up with a list of 10 co-authors. Okay, if they contribute also really work on the paper, but not just the data, fine. But my personal experience with, for an example, with not so nice a connotation was an article of mine with really lots of data involved and nice work from very nice people who was in a discussion. So it is a special way of publishing the paper. So it is now stuck in the internet. atmospheric chemistry and physics discussions and will be published. But the data is somehow within this work, but and can never be reused for another research from my side, because I have tried to publish it. It has been then regarded as not worse for public as a peer-reviewed paper.
Yeah.
And there is the data, and there is the work, and all the energy, and all the money, and so this is, I think, one part of it. And what I would really try to now, as a project leader for open urban data at Meteor Suisse, is that the data that we make openly available, we have to let loose. We have to let it loose and say, this is the data, take it, do something nice, but we cannot avoid people doing things with the data that we say, oh my God, this is how it works, and this, and so to really let loose. And I have done my part, now it's to you to do the next part, and I trust you to do something.
So I'm anonymizing your data as we speak.
May I tap you now? You look like somebody that wants to be tapped. Yeah? Okay.
You can tap me?
But you can also tap me if you want.
I get the impression that you want to run the word. Hello, so my name is Jan. I'm anonymized.
Do you want to come on this side so they know my face now?
This is the chair of anonymization. Anyone sitting here is not sitting.
So I maybe messed the things up a bit, because all the stuff with privacy, you know, the first question is who are the good guys, who are the bad guys? And what is the data collection, what is the data use, and so on. If I take as an example the case of the German wings, this terrorist attack, or what you call it, everybody, or almost everybody, told, why didn't German wings not know his medical records? And a day before, everybody would say, if an employer is looking into somebody's medical records, it's criminal. And also, we were quite happy to know what were the searches. The searches, you know, he was alone in his home, and the next day you read in the papers, you know, what did he look for on Google. So the question is, of course, how do you know it? So because they know it. But in this case, you are happy. It was also the case that if you assume that the pilot is good guy and the bad guy comes from the cabin, and once you have it inversed, then of course the lock is on the wrong side. But of course, if you change it and you let the door to be open easier, then you have a problem that for this case you would save lives, but for thousand other cases you will lose lives. So this is a basic question, you know, like back to privacy, that we would like to know, you know, to know something you really need to connect data. For example, as we did this orthopedic research, if somebody doesn't come to a follow-up, we don't know if he is so happy that he doesn't need to come, so unhappy that he doesn't want to talk to us, change his address, die because of our intervention, because of us, something else. But in Switzerland, it was impossible to connect to some, you know, Zivilstand data. Simply you cannot do it. And in many, for example, medical cases, everybody that knows something about medicine, they say you have so-called multi-morbidity. You have many, especially older guys, have many medicines they take, and they really interact, and it's not invented. And then, of course, if you have a registry for one case, you should be able to connect it with other cases, and also to know about lifestyle and everything. But then, of course, based on purely medical data, you can re-identify somebody. And maybe let's work because you start to be about you know, data miners.
Yeah.
Because data miners are getting always better. And for example, there are works for how to identify person based on electrocardiogram.
Yeah.
It's purely medical, can be used in the genomic anyway. So I think you have no no solution. We have to increase the percentage of good guys in the society. It's the only thing.
So we haven't given Ralph a chance for a long time to speak, and I know you have to go pretty soon. There is one question which is really, I think we need to have an opinion from you, which is what privacy securing techniques, technologies, and standards should be promoted in the service of open research?
Oh, that's a difficult question because while everybody says that the internet, etc., is moving so technologically so quickly, unfortunately that doesn't hold for the security technologies. In the last 30 years, we are still talking, 40 almost, about RSA and Diffie-Hellman, and have a few common, maybe some even have disappeared again. So the main thing that happened is that maybe the prime factors got a little bit bigger because our cryptanalytic power has grown, but the fundamental mechanisms are the same since I'm in field. That's a few years already. So the deceiving thing, and even Snowden said that the cryptography is good, but do people know how to apply it? The thing we don't get done is PKI, a public key infrastructure where worldwide you can find each other's keys without investing a lot of time and money. And I think there are quite some political motivations that this doesn't exist. It's even decreasingly existing because today's news about whatever allegedly Chinese hackers going after American personnel data, 4 million or whatever was in the news. The point is, the world unfortunately doesn't grow together, but is fragmenting. That, from what I heard lately, is that now the last Chinese issuer got kicked out of Microsoft's root store, and probably many are to follow. So why we thought we could, under the UN, have one hierarchical global way of identifying each other and then securely exchange data, it seems that that doesn't fly. So we need more peer-to-peer mechanisms to identify each other. But the base technologies are here. So, and if people are using some of those technologies, it's got a lot harder for the attackers. And then the way to do it is social engineering and all kinds of similar things. And that's typically by orders of magnitude cheaper to get to the data than trying mounting a cryptanalytic attack. Coming back to the lady which is pixeled out, I'm now switching topics. My experience with research and publishing is not as negative as yours. It's okay to have people affiliated, and it's good because then you can ask them who did it. If they were not perfect in formulating their thoughts, maybe you can ask them. So I have been on a few patents and few publications, and have enjoyed always being in a research environment where people didn't prevent me from publishing. So I think the problem is not really with the research in itself, but it's more the social structures where some people try to get scientific merits without doing the work. But that's not really limited to science. That's happening in almost all fields.
You can quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Luc Henry, and I'm an ex-researcher. So to comment on this, I think at least as soon as the research is funded by taxpayers' money, the data itself has no value whatsoever. I mean, if you collecting the data, okay, costs time and instrumentations and things like this, but this, I mean, in most cases, these funds come from private money anyway. As a researcher, you don't contribute.
Private or public?
But public. Well, it could be both, but anyway, the goal is to create data that are used by you as a researcher. So the value you add is actually the analysis, and we're not talking about data anymore. So I would argue that as a researcher, if I collect any data, they don't belong to me, they belong to the world where I collected them. And that's true for the genome. working
But I
on
think
now.
that's a paradigm shift that people should publish the raw data today, which was kind of not affordable
Mhm.
before. And I still think collecting data, even with public money, is also an effort and deserves merit, because I've seen too many
That's-
public funds being used and no data coming out.
That's true, but what I mean is the credit you get for publishing something shouldn't be based on the way you collected the data, but what you did with it. And exposing the data, this joins the meteorological data aspect here. I think you have to expose yourself to criticism and potential counter demonstration and people using your data to do something completely different. I mean, this is where the value of your data.
So I'm just going to inject one thought here. I think we need someone who represents the public institution to come and say whether their money talks or not. How much control do you feel you have over data outputs, providing data to researchers? I'm just going to suggest that you inject yourself here, because I think this needs an answer. You need to choose someone to tap a shoulder.
Just what does the citizen get from science when government pays to do science? It's a tricky question. I would say if you go down and do pure physics research, base research, you don't even know. Let's take NASA. What does NASA bring to the society? For me as a citizen, okay, at the end you end up with solar cells and Teflon pans, but that's maybe 1% of the money spent in there. Is it worth to bring yourself as a gov agency or as a governmental body to spend so much money to bring at the end out a solar cell or a Teflon pan? I think yes, it is. It really is. I mean, if you know already the result, you don't need to do research. And I think that's the big advantage of civil society, Zivilgesellschaft, that you decide as a society that there should be grant for public research with fundamental research, which does not have at the on first glance a result which can be reused for a patent or a big dollar result. I think we have to really make a difference. That's key. On the other hand, if I, as a gov agency, put money into a research project, is it a European Framework Program or a NATS-Fonds project in Switzerland, the results are actually usually public available. I think it's well documented, you have a backup, it goes to archives, you can reproduce the results. I think this is usually the case. Ages ago, you had libraries in Alexandria, in Zurich, where you could read the dissertation or reread the base data you had. What we have nowadays is we have more opportunities than just a library, and I think that's where you're pointing at. And that all the data which is made available or used in digital form should also be made available in digital form. That applies especially for weather data. I mean, this is easily stored. It's 100 years of data are now available on a USB thumb drive, and this should be made public available. But then, again, you have to know the law, the law, and everything is Panther. It's moving on. I think we're going the right direction. I think that's why we are sitting here to show the decision makers that if data is open, we can progress. One good example is Transport API of the Open Data CH group, which years ago started, and nowadays everyone is moving onwards. Federal Transportation Department, the SBB moves on, and we really go on with good ideas. And there's also research data behind. I think open data brings public invested money in research forward. But you have to say that all the time. If you don't show up at the conference, you won't get any refund for the next research project.
I think that
Oleg.